side and one.
What's up, everyone, and welcome in to your Celtics source, where the Boston Celtics beat the Toronto Raptors 110-108 in the final preseason game before the Celtics start the season next Wednesday against the Philadelphia 76ers. And I'm not going to do a preview on the season or whatever. We're going to do that over the weekend just before the season actually kicks off. I'm going to stick to the game itself, and then I'll talk a little bit about that coaches versus media game yesterday, which was just a wild domination by the Celtics coaches. Even more than expected once we found out that that's what it was going to be. It was not going to be, just the media going against each other. It was going to be ex-NBA players, coaches, college players, all of that. But as for this game, the biggest question, obviously, coming out of this game is the health and status of Jaylen Brown. Right, he went down with a sort of tight hamstring. Hamstring tightness is what I think they diagnosed it as. Obviously, if Jaylen Brown this team goes as Jaylen Brown goes, despite the performance that Derrick White had, which we'll talk about. But if Jaylen Brown is not ready to go day one, this team is going nowhere. So obviously, anytime we hear it, Jaylen Brown injury this season, our ears are going to pick up and we're going to, sort of be on the lookout for more news and information. At the moment, we don't have it, just that, he sat out this game, and who knows, he was probably going to sit out the game anyway once he went down with that, tightness, because why risk it? But we'll see. They're probably going to do, some health checks, maybe they'll do, he'll go to the doctor tomorrow and figure that out. So we'll learn more tomorrow. But as for this game, before we get into Derrick White and his performance, I want to talk about Namias Queta. The story coming in with Namias Queta all season was that, he's going to, or all summer and then, into preseason, is that he's the starting center. It's his job to lose. But the way preseason has been going, Namias Queta has not looked great. And I thought this was the first game where he actually put on a starting caliber performance. Right? And the good thing about this game is that the Raptors played their starters. Right? It was not like, he was going up against, the G League of another team. He was going up against NBA starters. So there is something you can take away from the performance he had tonight. Right? And he only had 8 points in 21 minutes. But the 12 rebounds, right? The biggest problem with this team through the first couple preseason games has been the rebounding problem. So it's good to see that he's having 12 rebounds, 5 offensive, 7 defensive rebounds. He also had 2 assists, a steal, 4 blocks, right? He was spectacular on the defensive boards, blocking shots, contesting shots, making it hard for the Raptors to get any easy shot off, which is what you need from a true center, right? The Celtics don't have that, tier 1 rim protecting center like they had last year with Luke Cornett and Kristaps Porzingis and even Al Horford to a degree. And so it's going to be, I wouldn't say a committee because, it's probably him and Garza are the only players that are, probably tall enough to contest shots of, the tallest NBA players. But it's going to be a committee of, a team effort to contest shots, right? You might not be able to get up and block a shot, but you're going to need contests from White, from Simons, from Brown, all to try and, see if they can get in the way of a shooter and make it harder for any player to get up an easy shot, especially when you don't have the true number 1 rim protection. But if you're going to get a performance that you get like this from Queta, it makes it so much easier on your guards and forwards because they don't have to worry as much about staying in front of their defender because you have someone behind you that can clean up the mistakes that you make, right? And that's key for this team because they're gonna make lots of mistakes. They're probably gonna have three guards out there at all times, especially in the starting lineup, that are not great defenders, right? And Simons, Pritchard, White is a good defender, but he's a little smaller, right? It's going to be harder for him to guard those, he's going to be great against guards. He's not going to be as good against stronger, bigger forwards, right? And so you're going to need Jaylen Brown to clean up or take, that spot so that Derrick White can focus on the guards. But that means Simons, Pritchard, Hauser all have to be able to defend as well. And if you have a guy like Queta out there helping you out, it makes all the difference. Okay, moving on. Well, I think, we talk about Queta being that, it's his job to lose. And one of the guys that could steal that spot from him is probably a Chris Boucher, right? And he's looked fantastic in almost every preseason game, especially against the Raptors, his old team. And he is a much smaller guy that's going to be more of a small ball lineup when he is out there. But I'm not sure Joe Mazzulla cares to have a true center out there at all times. I think he's just going to go based on matchups and who's playing the best, right? And that would definitely go for a Chris Boucher. And this wasn't his best game overall, right? He only had 5 points in 19 minutes. I think Joe Mazzulla, basically dialed it back a little bit for his production, or at least minutes and workload, given that he's played in every preseason game. But he did have 9 rebounds. Again, fixing their mistakes that they had on the defensive glass in the first couple games. 7 of these offensive, he had a block, a steal, no assists for him, but I thought he was well-rounded on the defensive end of making stops, contesting shots. Simons, he, once again was great on the offensive end. Coming off the bench, 14 points in 32 minutes. Not great shooting overall, just 2 of 9 from 3, 4 of 13 overall. But 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. A lot of turnovers for him. A couple of those came in that final, 2 minutes where the Toronto Raptors sort of made a run, to close the gap of this game. Actually tied it up before Xavier Tillman had a great shot to seal the deal with 0.3 seconds left. Very similar to that shot he had against the Kings last season, right, where the game was tied, and then he makes a shot just before the buzzer to seal the deal. The broadcasters were talking about that, Drew and Scow, at the end of the game when he made that shot today. But as for Simons, right, he has to continue to work on his defense because he picked up some early fouls in this game. It wasn't terrible, but he's sort of flying around uncontrollably, just jumping at every, pump fake, every, step back. So he has to work on, calming himself down, staying in front of the guys. And even if the guy goes up and shoots, like, that's better if you don't jump. You just put up a hand rather than you jump. He doesn't actually shoot, and he just, steps by you and has a much easier shot in the paint. Right, so that just can't be happening. At worst, just put up a hand to contest the shot. You don't have to jump if you're not quite ready to be able to do that yet. Before we get to White, I talked about this, just a much better overall team rebounding game, right? Which is something that they're going to have to continue to work on. It's never going to be perfect. I think there's going to be games where they have great rebounding performances, and then against some of those scrappier teams that are great on the offensive boards, they're going to struggle, right? And the Raptors are one of those teams where, like every team, I guess, when they make their shots, they're a totally different team. But, the way they play, they don't have, lots of talent around a Scotty Barnes and their, Emmanuel Quickley, their best players. They did bring in Brandon Ingram. Actually, they brought him in at the trade deadline last year, but he was so injured he couldn't play the rest of the season. But he was, he looked good tonight, making shots, especially over Simons, who was just, I think, a little too short to be guarding him. But I think that matchup will sort itself out. But I think the Raptors are one of those teams where, if they make their shots, they can be a top 6 team in the East. But if they're not making their shots, they can definitely fall all the way to the bottom 3 team in the East. I'm probably going to have them right about the 11th or 10th spot, which is, usually where they have been the last couple of years. But I think, these two games against the Raptors for the Celtics have been, their hardest ones of the preseason. And in the first game, they didn't play their starters either, the Raptors. So, it was more of a, confusing why that game was so close, and they actually won that game in the end. This game, I'm not too concerned about the way they closed the game, the Celtics, because Pritchard was sitting on the bench, White was sitting on the bench. Obviously, Brown was in the locker room, or maybe he had come out, but he wasn't playing that second half. All right, before we wrap it up here, actually 2 more things. Derrick White and then the media game. Derrick White is taking full advantage of him being the second, number 2 option on this team. Just a terrific performance from him. And he played, regular season minutes, 35 minutes, scored 33 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 blocks, just 1 turnover. This was a typical Derrick White game. A game that if we get in the regular season, if we get games like this in the regular season, Celtics will be hard to beat, because you get this from Derrick White, you get, 30-plus points from Jaylen Brown, you get Simons. I think it's hard to forget that, it's hard to remember that this team is not actually going to be a bad offensive team, I don't think. I think they have so much talent offensively. Obviously, they're missing a couple guys, that left last year. But I think with the, addition of a Simons and a Boucher, I don't think this team is bad offensively. The struggle is going to be defensively. So if the Celtics are winning, shootouts, I think we have to take that as the season, as the season progresses and we play tougher teams. Yes, we're going to need the defense to stay it up. But, I wouldn't be shocked if we see, games in the high 120s, even 130s, where the Celtics are just, scoring on one end and then just letting guys score on the other end. It's going to be hard for the Celtics to defend some of those, Western Conference teams. But I think they can keep scoring with them. So it'll be interesting to watch. But back to Derrick White, right? He is that number 2 option that I think goes unnoticed most of the league, because he is a guard. He didn't come up, the typical way, right? He sort of, started in the G League, worked his way up, sort of a minor role, and then as the years have gone on, he's grown into, I would argue their second best option last year, or third option last year. I think he was a little bit better than Kristaps Porzingis was. But, I'm going to wrap it up here because, what else can you say about a preseason game? We all know the real season starts a week from tonight, Wednesday, at home against the 76ers. And, that's when we'll figure out if what the Celtics have been doing, the pace, the transition, which they didn't have a lot of in this game, but, overall throughout preseason training camp, we've seen the pace, we've seen the effort, the physicality that Joe Mazzulla is trying to instill in these guys. So we'll see if it all comes to tuition in game 1. But before I wrap it up here, I'll just quickly talk about that media game. I mean, I don't know what Joe Mazzulla was trying to do. The fact that in 12 minutes of play, the media team got destroyed 57-4. Like, Joe Mazzulla had to know this was coming, especially when he decided to, like, just, have every guy press on every possession. Like, I don't know if Joe Mazzulla, like, why would Joe Mazzulla want to do this? The question I'm asking. Like, what gain does he get out of that? Beating down on, weaker opponents. Like, at least mix the teams up and, have a draft maybe. And I know they're going to do multiple of these throughout the season. At least they hope to. But and maybe they just did this for the first one. And maybe we're making it, a bigger deal out of it. I guess it doesn't really matter because they are, NBA players. They are, or ex-NBA players, college D1 players, coaches, all of those, right? So it makes sense that the score was as lopsided as it was. And Bobby Manning for CLNS Media actually had a great article stating how the domination showed why they cover the Celtics. They aren't not the Celtics, which I thought was kind of funny and accurate. But yeah, we'll wrap it up here. Follow on social media. We will be live this weekend with a couple episodes previewing the NBA season, the Celtics season. We're gonna do a NBA team win totals draft where we draft all the teams and try to get a team or a group of teams that are going to have the best record overall. So that'll be fun. So tune into that. That'll probably be Saturday night, I think. And then Tuesday night, we'll do our full season preview for Wednesday's game. But, yeah, follow on social media. And until next time, go Celtics.